The referendum we need. Again, the referendum we need is the subject of this monologue. Last Monday, April the 24th, some Ambazonian groups, including yours truly, representing the interim government, and stakeholders in their own rights, met in Washington, D.C. at the invitation of the Hudson Institute. Top on the agenda was getting all stakeholders, groups or individuals to agree on a resolution that can quickly bring the conflict to an end. Also in the agenda was unity and collaboration in messaging, especially when related to the international community. In assembling or hosting the leaders and stakeholders of Ambazonia, the Hudson Institute felt that if all are seen to be speaking and channeling the same message, the possibilities are higher that our message can have more traction, contrary to when groups and stakeholders communicated in the past unilaterally. But again, the biggest agenda point was finding out the fairest, easiest, and enduring solution to the 7-year conflict. The subject of referendum was suggested by our host as not only the quickest way to end the conflict, but equally the one method easily marketable to the international communities and partners. The subject was put to a rigorous and spirited debate. All the 14 participants, that is, with the exception of our observers, everybody had an opportunity to make contributions to the subject. Every Ambazonian in the meeting agreed to the idea of a referendum. We agreed that it is the route most needful at this moment for Ambazonians to pursue. The consensus was so unanimous that a vote was not needed to arrive at it. The meeting did not discuss the modalities for such a referendum. However, it was agreed that such modalities will be made only after further wide consultations with the Ambazonian people. The quorum was certainly too small to handle the subject, and besides, it would have been a rush discussing modalities in a 3-hour meeting. That wasn't going to be possible. As you know, the efforts out there to sabotage it. But what does this idea of a referendum not do? Listen to me. It is imperative that we understand what the idea of this referendum does not seek to do. This referendum does not seek to deny by any way or means the independence granted the former British Southern Cameroons, the United Nations Resolution 1608 of 1961. However, we are agreed that many things have changed ever since Cameroon's crusade of trying to integrate us into their country started. The referendum does not seek to deny the fact that there are no articles of union between La République du Cameroun and the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. Rather, it merely acknowledges that the two countries have lived together as in dating, or a man and a woman dating, but that over the years they have grown to be so many irreconcilable differences, triggering the need for the people of the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia to back out of the date, and that their voices must be heard. This referendum idea does not mean that we are against a negotiated process or settlement either. We are still very supportive of any internationally negotiated process that promises us nothing but an independent Ambazonia. So far, La République du Cameroon appeared not to be interested in one. Within a period of 4 months, they have walked away from 2 of such processes, the Swiss process and the Canadian process. Accepting a referendum does not mean that we are so desperate for now. Of course not. Even if the conditions are not fair and just, of course not. We are not fixated to a referendum. We have not signed onto one. What we have here is an expression of intent. What this means is that for us to sign onto a referendum, the conditions will have to be fair and just, and guarantee that there will be no loopholes hindering our people from freely expressing and exercising their right to vote, and that all the votes are counted. The referendum, ladies and gentlemen, must be organized and monitored by the United Nations and other international organizations, including, of course, the African Union. Voting will have to be restricted to Ambazonians only. La République du Cameroon will have no say and no rule in the organization and conduct of the exercise. Logistics will have to be provided by the international organizations conducting the referendum. The United Nations and partners would have to determine registration procedure or methods. We assume that La République du Cameroon shall have no role to play from conception to the announcement of results for the referendum. But some of you may be asking right now, but why a referendum? Why a referendum after 7 years? Where were we? Allow me to explain this in a parabolic language. If you are embarked on a journey by way of, say, a bus or plane, and it happens to catch on fire, and firefighters show up but cannot open the door of the plane or the bus, and they succeed only in tearing open the window, will you refuse to use that window to vacate because only the door must be used? If you insist on using only the door, you may die inside there before that door is opened. That is, if they can even open it. This, ladies and gentlemen, this our crusade for freedom and independence can be likened to this journey. We are in a bus or plane that is being asphyxiated. What do you do when you feel suffocation? You rush to get out through any available channel, isn't it? In our case, our available channel is a win-win situation. There is no way we lose in a referendum. There is no way we do not arrive our destination through a referendum. The desired destination is what I am talking about, and that is a free, totally free and independent Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia. When we were young, going to school or to the farm, some chose to use the motorable roads, which were a little bit longer, and some chose to use bush tracks, which we call conshots, which were a little shorter. Both arrived at school or farm, but of course, as rocky and tedious as the bush paths were, those who used it still arrived, and in most cases arrived first. Let me assure you that we are so desperate here for a free Ambazonia that we will not hesitate or ignore any route that gives us that answer that gives us a free Amazonia. A free Amazonia is all we want. And how we get it isn't really relevant, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to get there. That's all that we want. We cannot be so fixated on historical facts to the extent we forget or ignore what our end goal is. Spare me the history. It will not give us Amazonia. It will not. It's been over 60 years now since we started talking history. The only thing good about it is that it awakened our consciences and got us to where we are now. But we must then move on from here. That means we must move on. That means we must move on to our destinations. As they say, the means determines the end. That's where we are. That's what we are pursuing. We have preached our history for 60 years. Show me now, or show me how many international partners have agreed or been convinced to come to our aid because of our history. Even those who made and witnessed the history, they find it difficult to get back to it. But it is possible that we can get their attention using the reality of the moment. And the reality is a humanitarian situation. We have been fighting for 7 years. How much international support has come to us? In this newfound opportunity in a referendum, we now have partners who are ready, prepared to do the legwork and the door knocking for us because they are convinced that our message and demand is clear, simple, fair, and just. Why shouldn't we seize on this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen? A referendum creates the opportunity for a ceasefire on the ground. This means that once both parties have agreed to it, French Cameroon troops are pulled back and replaced with an international peacekeeping force. The killing squads of La République are finally gone. Our people can once more live in peace while waiting for the day of the vote to come. They can go about their businesses as was before the war. All hostilities are then brought to a halt. Perhaps, the biggest advantage still is the voice of the people having to have the final say. La République du Cameroon has in the past tried hard in the 7 years of this war to convince the international community that it is the diaspora that is talking and promoting secession, as I like to call it. La République wants the world to believe that Amazonians want an indivisible Cameroon with special status. If La République du Cameroon, ladies and gentlemen, is very convinced about this, then a referendum provides them with such an opportunity to prove their case, to seal the argument, isn't it? But also consider this. We have seen this tendency in some diaspora leaders, the pseudo leaders, the tendency to present themselves as sole owners of Amazonia or the struggle, the ones to decide the fate of Amazonia. In a referendum, diaspora leadership will be off the table. They will just be as equal as you. A referendum shifts the final decision from the diaspora to ground zero, to the people. This does not mean, however, that the diaspora is not qualified to vote or to participate or to carry out education. It means merely that no single group, not even this interim government and any stakeholder or warlord in the diaspora, decides for the people. They will have to fly to ground zero to cast their vote, just as any other Ambazonian on ground zero will do. I guess this is one of the reasons some of the so-called leaders, pseudo-leaders, are so worried and have embarked on a campaign of sabotage. Unfortunately for them, the voice of the people must prevail. It will be supreme. Any diaspora pseudo-leader who wants you to believe that a referendum is a bad idea should give you the alternative, isn't it? And a practical method of attaining it too. It's not enough to shout negotiation and shout history. Some of them, just for the sake of disagreement say, oh, a referendum is not what we need. It should be a plebiscite, they say. Can any one of you out there point out any country that has attained independence within the last 30 years through a plebiscite? Is there one out there? Of course not. It's referendum. Let me take you back to this historical argument being advanced by this pseudo leader out there with a very dubious character. They have laid out the history facts of our independence, which are very, very correct. However, that alone will not give us back our country. These comrades oppose a referendum, but they have failed to propose a pragmatic solution. A referendum, listen to me, has legitimacy in our case on the grounds that, despite the legitimacy of the historical facts, we still have among us some Ambazonians, Southern Cameroonians, who are still craving to live in one Cameroon, and some of them are actually occupying positions in their government and institutions. It only makes it fair that their voices too will have to be heard. In fact, it is only by giving everybody and every shade of opinion in Ambazonia the opportunity to vote that we would have proven to La République du Cameroun that the idea that Southern Cameroonians still want to live in the United Cameroon is a fat lie, is false. Eritrea went through an internationally organized referendum, ladies and gentlemen, despite the clarity of their case and international law, for the same reason, to give a voice to all its citizens. It is not just enough to lay out our case. Those who have laid out our case ought to equally lay out a solution and the means to attaining it. Firepower has to be increased and sustained, but we also need to bring an alternative to the attention of the international community while fighting. That is a referendum, the place of the referendum. Fighting, talking, and diplomacy must be our strategy. The question is, talking about what? Repeating the history of the violations which have brought us this war? We must float reasonably attainable objectives which will lead to victory, while fighting to pressurize the international community to take real action, And if that action is a referendum, we welcome it. Not only has La République du Cameroon rejected a negotiated settlement, the Chief of Staff of its genocidal forces only yesterday in Bamenda reaffirmed that it will intensify its genocidal campaign to subdue our people to victory. We have a message to him and to La République du Cameroon and its genocidal masterminds. They will fail miserably. The genocidal statement of La République du Cameroon calls for a strong response from us and our restoration forces. We have a fundamental right, ladies and gentlemen, to defend ourselves against an external aggression and genocide. On the other hand, some of our people who are engaged in this struggle have accurately emphasized the justice of our cause and the need for the restoration of our independence, which was recognized by the United Nations. We are all united on that objective. The issue which is at the core of our support for an internationally supervised referendum is that the United Nations has increasingly used that mechanism, the referendum, to conclusively resolve justified international conflicts such as ours and beyond. We have to live in the present world. It was used in the case of Eritrea, in East Timor, South Sudan, and recently it has received support in the Saharan Arab Republic, Democratic Republic conflict. In our case, after the AAC-1 in Boya and AAC-2 in Bamenda, our leaders organized a signature referendum in which more than 90% voted for the restoration of independence. The record of the signature referendum was sent to the United Nations. So therefore, bringing back the idea of an internationally organized referendum is an attainable objective. It is an attainable objective for the actualization of independence. Even federalists like Cardinal Christian Toomey believe in the referendum objective, and indeed conducted a survey which showed an overwhelming majority supporting our total freedom and independence. Again, ladies and gentlemen, those who have accurately recounted the history of our just cause have not laid out a credible avenue of obtaining our independence with reasonable international support. They are relying on La République du Cameroon coming to the negotiation table. They have not. We too want a credible, internationally mandated, organized, negotiated settlement as soon as possible, to stop Cameroon from continuing the genocide. When that occurs, an internationally organized referendum will still be a strong solution. Why should we then have to wait for La République du Cameroon to control the international mood by deciding whether an internationally mandated negotiation will take place or not? They walked away from the internationally endorsed Swiss initiative and publicly rejected the Canadian process without any consequences. No one nation has declared any sanctions against La République du Cameroon ever since. In spite of this conduct of La République du Cameroon requires a rethinking and a strong response from us. La République has opted for a genocidal war and war alone without an alternative. It is irresponsible, totally irresponsible for us to want to wait for a change of mind of La République when we know it is not coming. Ladies and gentlemen, recounting the history of our just cause and making demands on the international community for a solution without the same time suggesting a solution to resolve the conflict is the most irresponsible thing for leaders and the people of the Southern Cameroons to do. And that is the reason why we have endorse an internationally mandated and organized referendum for the resolution of the conflict. Thank you.